You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with James Creviston and LukeLacoy.
Cloud. And I'll do the intro. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. I am James Creviston, and today we have my co-host, Mr. LukeLacoy.
I was almost introduced as the guest this time.
You were.
So close.
I do that because I start to talk about who we're gonna have, and then I go to you. I don't know why I do that. I'm bad. This is why I don't have a late night talk show or something. But
That's understandable.
We do have a great guest though this week. He's been on AGT. He does comedy all around LA. You probably seen him. He's super he's famous for roasting the judges of AGT, which I think is an awesome, that's a gutsy thing to do. I don't know about you, but if Simon Cowell would probably make me freak out, or any Howie Mandel, who's great. I'd be I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you go and roast the judges who were supposed to pass you on to the next thing. That's probably the gutsiest move I've ever heard a comedian ever do in my entire life. But we're gonna ask him about it. So please welcome the very talented, they're very cool, they're very funny, Alex Super.
Hey. Hi guys. Yeah, thanks for at first I was is he going to introduce me, or are we just jumping right into compliment session? Either way, I'm good. I'm here for that. Yeah, I mean, it's a bizarre thing to do on that show for sure. I go in there and I'm a heel and I get people to intentionally not like me. I'm very much the antithesis of what's supposed to be happening on that show. And for some reason, the producers love me for it. And I feel somewhere along the way, all the judges treated the producers like crap, somewhere, whether it was just excuse me, can you please take the coffee grinds out of my filter? Hello. And then they were you know what, Heidi Klum, one day we're going to find a way to get back at you one day. And then I pop up and they're and here he is. All the things that we couldn't say.
Well, what's great about that is that's the antithesis of comedy too. We're not supposed to make people hate us on stage. We're supposed to love us. So I think it's such a gutsy and real thing.
I mean, that's part of the fun of it, is that I really am the first time I went on there, I was they probably won't get this. And then I started to think positive. I was maybe they will. Maybe the judges will get it and the whole audience will start laughing. And obviously that is not what happened at all. If you've never seen it, I was horrendously booed by 3,000 people for many minutes. But it was one of those things where when I went back, I was well, look, it can't be any worse than the first time. So now I'm just doing it to myself as a weird form of schadenfreude against my own personality. I don't know what I'm doing on there. I really don't.
Well, it gives me an Andy Kaufman type vibe. And I don't know if that's your intentional thing. I mean, you said a heel, so I don't know if you're into wrestling or whatever, but that's normally a wrestling term. So that's what it made me think of. Was that the intention?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I've never really been a big wrestling fan, but I very much respect the theatrics of what they do. And as I got more into roast battle and just roasting as a whole, I had to kind of separate myself from doing these really dark and sometimes very cruel jokes. So the way I do it is by balancing it with very silly outfits and a funny voice, and try to make it as satirical as possible so people understand that it's just a joke. Mm-hmm. And even still, most people don't get it.
Most people didn't get Andy Kaufman. Don't feel bad.
I know. Well, that's very true. So, I mean, if I can be in a legendary category like that, then I guess I'm making the right moves.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in comedy. How did you start? When did you start? Where did you start? Kind of give us your background, your origin story.
So March 9th, 2009, in LA, it was actually, I moved here from Baltimore to be an actor. And then about 5 months later, I did my first set in Los Angeles. I did a bringer show. A friend of mine was like, dude, you got to do stand-up comedy. I'm doing a show at the Comedy Store. Come and watch. And I was like, whoa, you're performing at the Comedy Store? That's crazy. And like, this is a friend that had moved out here right when I did, and he didn't do a lot of stand-up. So I was just like, man, performing at the Comedy Store. I went to the show, and it was a bringer show, and I didn't know what that was. And for those of you in the audience who might not know, basically it's pay to play. They say, if you bring us 5 friends, you can do 5 minutes on this show. So it's, you know, it's a system for newbies that don't know any better to get stage time. And I went to the show at the Comedy Store, and no joke, he went up 21st in the lineup.
Oh, wow.
My friend, 21st. And I watched all of these comics do their time. And I was sitting there. I didn't know I was at a bringer show. I just think I'm at the Comedy Store. And I'm watching these people, and I'm like, isn't that funny? These people aren't that good. Like, I know I've never done this before, but I've watched a ton of stand-up in my life, and I know this isn't that good. And so then he was like, well, do you want to try it? And I was like, yes, 100%. I think I want to do this. I think I'm funnier than that. And he was like, okay, cool. And then he texted me the next day and was like, I got you booked in 2 weeks. You're going to perform at this place called, it was called Comedy Night at the Aura at the time. It's this place in Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. It eventually turned into the Spotlight Comedy Club, but I did it. I went on stage that night and had one of those like miraculous first time sets where the host told the audience it was my first time, so they had a little leeway. But also, I'd been acting for many years, so I kind of knew how to be on stage, and I knew how to be funny. And so I had this great set and walked off stage, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I figured it out. And then I bombed horribly for the next 15 or 20 sets. I don't even know how bad, because I had this false confidence going on in my head.
Now, on that first set, did you write material, or did you just go up there and wing it?
Oh, I wrote hard. Okay. I wrote and I memorized. I was hairbrush in the mirror, like looking, you know, like, oh, here we go, everybody. And I remember most of the jokes from that first set. And again, like for a first timer, they were, you know, I'd say better than your average first timer, just because to me, like I'd been inundated with so much stand-up my whole life. I'd watched so many specials and so many HBO late nights and Comedy Centrals that like I kind of had a little bit of know-how as to how to write a joke. But it was still just, I mean, it was so terrifying. I talked so fast. And you think I talk fast now, like that set? I couldn't close my mouth.
That's awesome. And what did you do to get better? So you bombed those next 20 sets or whatever, but what did you do to get better? What was the key to you understanding comedy more and stand up more and getting better and better and better, besides repetition?
I mean, that's the easy answer, right? Is just stage time again and again, but just also just, you know, meeting more comics and finding new places to perform and always going up in front of new audience and in new kind of rooms, different environments, constantly changing what I was doing. So like, I wasn't married to my material right off the bat. Like I wrote, like some people, they will write a set and that is the set that they will do for their first 6 months. And I was like, after I did great on my first set, I was like, well, I got booked to do this bringer again. I'm going to do a brand new 6 minutes. And that was a terrible idea. I didn't repeat anything. And I remember my manager at my day job came to see me. I was like, I'm doing stand-up comedy, because like, that's the problem when you first start, is no one tells you that nobody should be watching you do this right now. And you're just like, I'm a comedian now. Hey, guy that pays my bills, want to come see me talk about this? And like, it's like, and then I just did so horrible. And he had to do afterwards. He's like, hey, well, you know, you got work tomorrow. You still got your day job. And I'm like, yeah, that I do. But yeah, I mean, you keep going up in front of new people, and you just keep refining and reworking and figuring out who you are. And it takes, I mean, you guys know this, it takes so many years to really figure out how you want to present yourself on stage. Like, we're just, in the first few years, you're just imitating things that you saw. You're watching kind of, how do I write a one-liner joke like Stephen Wright? How do I just scream like Sam Kinison, which was honestly 90% of my early days, was me just on stage like, oh, I might not be the funniest, but I'll be the loudest. And, you know, nobody, for the most part, people don't like that guy. Like, so you gotta rein it in a little bit.
Luke, you had a question?
I have a little quick. This is great that we're doing like a life cycle of comedian right now. This is amazing. This was like, so six, and this is like how small the comedy community is. It's really interesting. Around like 2014, 2015, I was doing open mics in the Yoo-Hoo room. And I remember one of the open mics, you came in and you were like, you popped in and you're like, yeah, I have some roast jokes, you know, let me try these out. And you kill the room. And then I think you left after that. And then everyone bombed after, because like just raised the energy so high and like it destroyed it was fantastic. Like, because I mean, the energy was so low beforehand too. And then it got raised too high.
You know,
it was
that's
like bomb
weird,
after.
I've always had a lot of energy, like, especially like when I start performing, like something just takes over and I don't get tired at all. And people used to tell me all the time, because I was so high energy, they'd be like, dude, I don't want to follow you. Like, I don't want to have to go after you. And I would just be like, that's not my fault. I don't know what to tell you on, like, get a better personality, write better jokes. I don't like it. This is not my issue, is all I can think. But yeah, I mean, I used to just go, that was like early days of roast battle, when I used to go and I would actually write a ton of jokes and then go to open mics and be like, okay guys, just so you know, this person's about 5'10", they have blonde hair, they got a giant nose, and they always wear a stupid shirt. Here we go, everybody. And then I would just start saying these jokes. And, you know, some people, it was a big thing at that time to go to mics and practice roast jokes. And some people that weren't in the roast battle community hated it. I was always under the guise of, at least they're telling us jokes. Yeah. Even if we don't know who the person is, and these are very specific about some person we don't know, at least we're seeing their joke writing process, and they're not just going, man, so what did I do today? Well, I went to the grocery store, and you guys are never gonna believe what happened at the grocery store. Like, whatever. Like, I was like, at least this person is saying, set up, punch, set up, punch. This is how a joke is written. Even if it's not a good joke, I always at least appreciated the effort in seeing someone try to really write something that was a hard punch and still very compact.
Yeah,
and I love that you room, man.
Yeah.
I love, dude, the thing is, people say what they want about flappers and, you know, their politics and all that. That club has always been kind to me and given me stage time and things like that. So I don't badmouth anybody in this. It's just not my vibe to go around talking smack about people. You know, if in the privacy of a home with a couple close friends, I might take a couple dumps on somebody, but like, for the most part, I try to be like, well, how about we say what we like about them instead? Let's find something positive here.
So yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of comedians, when they're starting out, don't learn to write jokes, because they go to open mics and do exactly what you just said, where they just talk about their day, hoping that something funny will pop out and then they have this bit. But that's not how it works. There's time and energy into it. That doesn't mean you have to sit down and write jokes, but you have to really think and kind of grow a joke. They do grow organically if you actually put time in to trying to write a joke. But the people who just get on stage and say, so what happened? Okay, so I was at work, and then like, nah, that's not funny. You're like, what are you doing? Like, do that before you get on stage. Like, you're wasting your time.
Well, that's my thing, is like, there's always going to be comedians that treat it more as a social club than they do a job, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But for those of us that are trying to do our work, like, let us do our work. Like, don't be talking in the back when you just want to hang out. Like, if I came here because I wrote specific jokes that day and I have something that I'm trying to get across to this room, then I would like people to pay attention. I'm going to prove to you that I did the work. If you ask anybody about why Seinfeld succeeded, it's because they were like, he wrote more jokes than anybody. It wasn't, oh, he just got lucky by figuring out and go, what's the deal with? Like, that's not what happened. He wrote every day and he went on stage every night to practice and try them out and figure out what works. And that's what the good comedians put in the work. And you can tell when someone doesn't, and it's very obvious when someone's on stage, and dare I say, they're kind of wasting all of our time. They're using it more as just, you know, their own masturbatory session instead of being like, hey, let me show you guys what I did today.
Yeah. And now, if somebody wanted to learn how to write a joke, like, how did you learn to write a joke? Was it just listening to other comedians, or did you read a book, or did you like talk to somebody? Like, how did you kind of learn? Because everybody has a different way of learning, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I very much involved myself in the stand-up comedy scene, and I would just, a funny idea would come to me, and then I would take the premise, and then I would go to a notebook and just write it out as far as I could go. There's a lot of comedians that will walk on stage with a premise, and they'll just try to figure it out. Like, like Louis C.K. will be like, that's what I do, and so a bunch of open micers are like, oh, well, if that's what Louis C.K. does, that's what I'll do. Excusing the fact that he's been doing it for 35 years, so he has warranted the time to go do that. People like me, that I need to take my stuff to the notebook, to the computer, and I stretch my ideas as far as I can go. So basically, I write down a premise in a notebook if I think of a funny line or a funny idea, and then I just start typing away as if I was on stage doing stand-up, and then I write as far as I can go until I don't even remember what my initial point was, and then I look at that a lot, and then I try to go to stage and remember as much of it as I can, and I record every single set, and then I go back through and figure out, what did I miss that was probably a key moment that would be important? What can I get rid of, chop out all the fat, and what stays there that is intrinsic to making this joke work, so that eventually it just gets bite-sized and smashed down into a fully digestible piece of material that is funny the whole way through. And sometimes it happens quick. There are times when I come up with something and I write it all the way through, and I go to the stage that night and I'm like, wow, that worked for like 4 minutes. That really worked, and I got to clean it up a little, but it's good. And other times I take it and crickets, and you go back to the drawing board, you take the L, and you just think, okay, is this worth revisiting, or should I just throw this away completely?
I never throw anything away, because there's always a nugget in there, even if it's like a tiny nugget. I'd never throw it away, because it might come back where you're writing a joke about something similar, and that piece is there, and you're like, oh my gosh, and now that's where that fits, and you put it together and you make this amazing joke with all these extra tags, because you had stuff laying around that was great, but it didn't fit anywhere else. And I do that all the time.
That's what the best storytellers do. Like, people are like, when you watch Jim Jeffries do a 47-minute story, you're like, how did he do that? And what happens is he has like a 20-minute story, which is already incredible on its own, but then he packs in all this other material that is related to it in kind of an offshoot way. So then he's doing bits in the middle of the story, but always keeping the overall arc of what he's talking about in there, so he never loses it. I mean, I remember one time I watched Jim Jeffries do a set at Meltdown, and he did like a 17-minute story, and it was all like so well put together, and he was just going through and he's killing the room, and at the end he just wrapped it up with a nice little bow, and it was I think he went up like 3rd or 4th in the show out of 7 comics. I remember watching that and going, I gotta go home and write immediately. Like, there's a bit that I've been trying to figure out, and I feel like when I just watched Jim Jeffries do that, I feel like I can find it. And I went home and completely like finished and full circled a bit that had been killing me for weeks of where to take it. And I think, when you watch, I'm inspired by the best, but I'm also really inspired by the worst.
Yeah.
I tell people that all the time. Like, don't go, well, George Carlin was this. It's like, no. Don't talk about George Carlin. Find the worst person you possibly can that is super successful and look at them and go, well, they're doing it. Yeah. So that's more inspirational to me than watching some amazing person,
Yeah, I mean, and I had that same thing. I had a bit that I was trying to work on about bears and about my wife and stuff. And I went and saw Louis C.K. in Oxnard. He was doing he came out and did the shows or whatever. And you couldn't have your phone or anything was in the case or whatever.
Right.
But I remember sitting there listening to his stuff, and I was working out my bit in my mind. As I was listening to him, and as soon as I got out of the venue and had my phone unlocked, I just started writing in my little notepad all the stuff I could remember and the stuff I could think about. And it ended up being one of my best bits. It's actually the bit that people come and say to me repeatedly. They get that bit is one of the best. But I was so inspired by watching somebody do it, a master class basically of comedy. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And I love when comedy works out that way because it's not easy. Too many people think you could just go on stage and say something funny and everyone's going to laugh. It's not your coffee room. It's not the lunch room at work. It's not going to happen that naturally. I wish it did. Every comedian wishes they could, but it doesn't. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, to your point, when the reason Ryan Niemiller said this really, really well, who got third place on America's Got Talent last year. He was like, a comedian will never win this show. And people said, why? And he said, because when a comedian is mastering his craft, it doesn't look like he's doing anything at all. Like, if a comic goes on stage, look, you watch Ali Wong. She talks very slow. It's very deliberate, but it's just kind of she's so at ease up there that it really doesn't look like she's doing much. So people if you're a guy and you are riding on a 25-foot unicycle, juggling flaming limbs, people are like, I can't do that. But if you're up there just going let me tell you about my wife, then people are like, oh, I can tell you about my wife all day. I want to hear about my wife. So that's what's so difficult in getting across is that we need to be the best person at what we're doing and still find a way to make it look like it's very easy, even though we're doing this incredibly difficult thing to hold people's attention with only our own thoughts.
Yeah, well, I always say comedy and magic are cousins, right? Because when you do it well, no one knows what the heck you're doing, and it looks perfect, and no one could see how much time you put into it. But when you do it badly, everyone knows that you messed up, and that it does not work, that you don't know what you're doing. Because we've all seen a bad magician.
Is this the king of clubs? They're like, no, that's the queen of diamonds. What happened there?
Yeah.
How many cards did you swallow?
That's exactly right. It's the moment that a comedian or a magician messes up, everyone knows, right? Everyone knows that it went off the rails and it's not working out. It's a scary thing. And you're right. When we do it well, it's pure magic, and people just assume that it's simple, right? I mean, how many people have seen David Copperfield, or when I was a kid, Siegfried and Roy, and they see the stuff and they're like, well, that looks easy. They make it look easy. I could be a magician, even Steve Martin tried to be a magician at one point, it was like,
yeah,
it happens.
It's all I'm missing is a white tiger, and then I could be doing that too.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right that no comedian will ever win AGT. I mean, Preacher got second.
Yeah.
And he lost to a ventriloquist, which I'm like, ugh. All right,
Tom Cotter got second. I mean, Tom Cotter has been doing it professionally for 25 years.
Yeah.
And still, and that's the thing. And the other thing about AGT is that those fans are not comedy fans.
Yeah.
They might take in a little comedy here and there, go to a club once a year, but they're not on the up and up about what's happening. They're not, their date night is not going to be to a comedy club to see it. And if it is, it's not to see a specific person. Probably it's just oh, a comedy club, that sounds wacky. And then so they go there. But that's the thing is I'm literally, from what I do on that show especially, I'm like there's so much vitriol against me because people not only are like, you're not even doing, people that don't understand are like, you're not even doing comedy, you're just ruining our show. Like, we have this great family show, we're all sitting around on the couch having family entertainment time, we want to watch singers, we want to watch jugglers, and then I come in wearing like a fur coat and a tail, and I'm like, let me tell you why you guys smell. And they're just like, no.
That's the best thing. That's what makes it amazing, and that's what makes it original. I mean, that's what we need in comedy is those kind of people. Like, we need another Andy Kaufman. I'm gonna call it. You're this generation's Andy Kaufman.
Gosh, I hope I write better jokes. That's all I can say.
Well,
like,
no. His jokes were intentionally done that way, though. I mean, that's like, I know you say like, oh, I want to write a better joke, but there was intent behind it. Everything that he did had an intention, and so do you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying you don't have to dress up as Elvis and stuff or whatever, or mud wrestle a lady or whatever. But
what I'll say, I take that comparison, and it really is an honor to be compared to someone like that, because what he did and what I think I very much do is I don't listen to what people tell me I should be doing. If you ask anybody why, like, so many of my friends were like, Alex, why didn't you do your own stand-up on AGT? Like, you could have really used that as a platform. And I'm like, because my stand-up's not right for that show. My stand-up is edgy, and it's a little offensive, and it can be kind of dark, and it is fun and silly, but it's not AGT material. Whereas if I go on there and do that, it's almost like a free pass to just do this very oddball character and still then extract whatever fans I can, have these clips go viral so people see it, and then they can decide whether or not they want to invest more time into me or not. So whenever somebody tells me something's a terrible idea, which I'm sure happened to Andy Kaufman all the time,
oh yeah,
and then I'm just like, oh, is it a terrible idea? Let's find out how terrible it is.
I love that. So if somebody wants to become a fan of you, Alex, where can they find you? Where can they look up your stuff? Where can they connect with you?
Super easy.
Don't give away your address.
Yeah. Hooper, I live in West Hollywood, California. Come. Everyone else in my neighborhood does. So, hoopercomedy.com is my website, at Hooper Hair Puff on all social media, and Achilles Heel is my podcast. New episodes come out every single Monday.
And what is that? What's your podcast about? I didn't know you had a podcast. Now I'm excited.
So, yeah, I have a podcast. We're about almost 75 episodes deep, I think. And basically what I do, so Achilles Heel, I bring people on, mostly comedians, musicians, artists, writers, people like that, people that amaze me in any way. And we deep dive into whatever the biggest struggle is in their life, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever it is that you can't get past and you battled and it has helped shape you as a person. We just go as far as we can into why your experience has been what it is and how you've come out stronger because of it. So every episode is titled like OCD with Sean Patton. I just did the winner of America's Got Talent this season. Comfortability was his. I just recorded one for belonging. Sometimes it's unexpected death, ADHD, anxiety, like things like that. And it's just really fun to talk to people about what their biggest issue is and have them break it down. And it really is just there it's very therapeutic, but also it just allows my listeners to say it makes them feel very just not alone anymore, like in their problems. No matter what the topic is, we find some pretty universal issues in every single one. So I highly encourage you to listen to my podcast.
I'm definitely gonna do that. Have you had imposter syndrome yet? That's my big Achilles heel.
That was number 5. Danielle Perez did it, and she's great. She's killing it right now. But yeah, hers was imposter syndrome, and I actually wasn't familiar at the time when she told me about it. And since then, like 3 or 4 people have been like, "Can I do imposter syndrome?" And I'm like, "We gotta wait." I did that episode, so I gotta wait a little bit before another cycle comes through.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for being on. Luke, where can people find you at?
You can find me at LukeLacoy, and actually, I did my hair poofy in honor of Alex tonight. So this is the poof going. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Alex, you have a special coming up, right? Or you're releasing
Yeah,
a special?
that's what I was going to plug real quick. So, November 19th, I don't know. I mean, this will drop probably sometime in the next week or so, but even still, November 19th, Thursday, it comes out on YouTube at 7 p.m. Pacific time, and it's a half-hour blended comedy special, where it's also part tour documentary, part travelogue. It's a bunch of shows that I did in London, with a bunch of B-roll footage of us like running around the city and what it's like to be a comedian touring a country that you've never been to. So, totally free to watch on my YouTube, Alex Super Comedy, and it's a really fun watch, and I know it's a fun watch because I've watched it 5 times, 10 times, and I don't hate watching it. And
awesome.
if you don't hate watching something that you did, I think you might have struck gold, because normally I'm like, I get that face away from me. I don't want to listen to my stupid voice and my mannerisms, my colloquialisms, whatever else. So yeah, it's called When Does the Club Shut? And November 19th, only on YouTube. So I would love for you guys to watch that.
We will watch it, and we'll also link it in the show notes, and we'll link it in the description as well. Thank you
That'd mean a
again.
lot.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much. Don't forget, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. We are over 200 episodes now. We're over 5,000 downloads a month. This is just, it's going and going. We appreciate every single person that's on here. Check out ComedyPreneur.com for tips and tricks and information about stand-up. And don't forget to check out my new podcast. I'm just the producer and writer for it. I don't really say too much on it. It's called WTF Happened in America this week. It does have explicit language, so just be aware of that if you're going to listen to it. But you can check out Clean Comedy Podcast, ComedyPreneur Show, and WTF Happened in America this week. And I'm everywhere. I'm on everything now. This is amazing. And thank you again, Alex. Thank you, Luke. And have a great week, everybody.